Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to dive into a cautionary tale that every single manufacturing leader really needs to hear. It's a story about how some very simple words can hide these devastatingly complex problems and lead a super successful company right into a multi-million-dollar failure. Okay, let's just jump right in. This quote, it gets right to the heart of the whole issue, doesn't it? We're looking at what seemed like a simple request that just spiraled into this massive and, frankly, predictable failure. And you know the most interesting part? It all started with a company that, by all accounts, was growing, thriving, and totally succeeding. So, the company at the center of our story was a firearms manufacturer pulling in an impressive $30 million in revenue. I mean, they were doing well, their marketing was on point, and on paper, they were a huge success. But that success was hiding a really critical structural weakness that was about to bring all their digital dreams to a screeching halt. So let's start with the request itself. On the surface, what they asked for sounded completely reasonable, right? They said they just needed some help with web design. But the reality of what they were actually trying to build was so much more complex. Yeah, behind that impressive revenue number, the company's whole digital operation was just a patchwork. They had multiple brands all stitched together on these small e-commerce platforms that were never, ever designed to handle that kind of scale. Customer data was just scattered all over the place in completely disconnected systems. It was a classic case of running an enterprise business on small business tools, all held together with, you guessed it, digital duct tape. Now, here's what's so fascinating about this whole thing. It's the huge gap between the language they were using and their actual reality. The entire company, I'm talking from the C-suite all the way down, was using small business words to describe what was, without a doubt, an enterprise-level problem. And that one little mistake in vocabulary, well, it set them up for failure from the very beginning. And this just illustrates that core conflict perfectly. Look on the left, you see their words, web design, IT support. And look on the right, you see the reality, a complex commerce platform, B2B wholesale operations, ERP integration. They were basically asking for a fresh coat of paint when what they desperately needed was a brand new foundation for the entire house. So the crucial point here is that this project was never, ever just about how things looked. It was about building a powerful digital ecosystem. They needed a commerce engine that could juggle both regular customers and their wholesale dealers, a real portal for those dealers, and a data architecture that could actually talk to their future systems. The website, that was just the front door to this much bigger, way more complex building. So how did it all fall apart? Well, it wasn't some big explosion. There wasn't one single catastrophic moment. Instead, the project just died slowly. It bled out from a series of predictable and, let's be honest, totally preventable failures. First off, nobody could even agree on what success would look like in terms you could actually measure. Success was defined with these vague statements like, the site looks good and it works. It was never tied to real business goals, like, say, reducing order errors by 20%, or getting 80% of dealers to use the new portal. And if you can't measure it, you really can't manage it. Next up, the classic scope creep. Every single week brought new, urgent requests that were always brushed off as just minor tweaks. Hey, can we add a fourth brand? We need to build a new promotion. Let's create custom pricing for this dealer group. None of these things went through any kind of formal process to see how they'd impact the timeline or the budget or the core architecture. It was just chaos. They also had this really fundamental misunderstanding of technology. They were treating core systems like WordPress or HubSpot as if they were just interchangeable parts, like changing a light bulb. They completely missed that these are foundational decisions. You're not changing a light bulb, you're trying to rewire the entire building while the lights are still on. And finally, there was just no one in charge who had the authority to enforce any standards. You had software vendors pushing their own products. You had internal teams pushing for the tools they were comfortable with. There was no single neutral voice in the room to make decisions based on a clear strategy for the business, instead of just what was easy for one department. So all of these little failures, they all point to one big central issue. The problem wasn't a lack of effort. It wasn't a lack of budget. It was a complete and total absence of governance. And it was made even worse by a huge flaw in how their team was structured. They fell right into the classic one tech person trap. Leadership treated this massive company-wide project as just a to-do list for a single person. They expected this one individual to be a high-level architect, a hands-on developer, a data analyst, a project manager, and like 5 other expert-level professionals all at the same time. I mean, come on, this isn't delegation, it's a gamble they were absolutely destined to lose. What they so desperately needed, but never even realized, was governance. They needed a formal structure, a framework of authority and accountability. Basically, a system to make sure that every single technology decision was directly serving the bigger business strategy. Something to bring order to all that chaos. And this is exactly what was missing. They needed a leader. Someone who could turn that business strategy into a real roadmap, define the technical plan, set the rules for making decisions, and, this is the most important part, have the authority to say no to protect the project from that constant flood of minor tweaks. Okay, so why does any of this matter to you? Because this story, it's not unique. It is happening right now in other companies. So let's turn this whole cautionary tale into a practical checklist that you can use to maybe diagnose your own projects. Ask yourself these questions. First, just listen. Listen to the language that's being used in your meetings. If your executive team, your marketing director, and your IT lead are all calling it a website project, that is a massive red flag. It almost certainly means you've misdiagnosed the true scope of what you are actually trying to build. Next, take a hard look at your team structure. Are you relying on a single tech person to be the hero who just handles everything? Look, no one person can architect, develop, integrate, and manage a modern commerce platform at scale. It's just not possible. If this is your setup, you are setting that person and your entire business up to fail. And finally, ask about what success actually means. Can you clearly state which key performance indicators, which KPIs, this project is supposed to improve? If you can't say whether success means reducing quote-to-order time by 30% or increasing dealer adoption to 75%, then you don't have a strategy, you just have hopes. So here's the bottom line. If any of those warning signs feel even a little bit familiar, your problem isn't what you think it is. The answer isn't to go hire another web design agency or watch another software demo. The real solution is to step back, acknowledge the true complexity of what you're doing, and fix your governance problem first. At the end of the day, it all comes down to this question. The language you use, it reveals the problem. Is your website just the front door to a well-built, solid digital platform? Or is the entire thing a house of cards, just waiting for a breeze to knock it all down? Because let's be real, in this day and age, for any growing manufacturer, there is no such thing as just a website. There are only platforms that work and platforms that don't.